So I'm gonna. Okay. All right. So let's get started. Okay. Hey now, and how are you doing? Want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Can't wait to talk to my next guest who I've met and has we have mutual connections. My friend Matt. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm blessed and highly favored.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Uh, so, I know you have a book. We're going to talk about your book. We're going to talk about a bunch of the things that you've gone through in life. But what I'd love to hear is what brought you, to this stage where you are right now, right? We've had a long journey in life. So tell us some of the challenges that you've faced, and then we'll work from there.
One, being autistic.
Hmm.
Two, being bullied throughout almost my entire life. It still continues today. Being the target because I am a gay Christian. A lot of so called Christians believe you can't be both. That's not true.
Correct.
The Here's the thing, Dave. It's actually I've gotten more criticism in the Christian community than any other community I've been a part of. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, I could imagine. I when my youngest daughter was born, my well now ex-wife, but my wife's best friend was gay, and we sat together and we'd love Jack to be the the Godfather. So Janine reached out to him and he was like, I don't know, and then I called him up and I said, Jack. He goes, because the church doesn't believe my lifestyle and in favor of those things. I go, that's not what I'm asking you to do. I go, I'm Jewish, and so they don't believe in my lifestyle either. I used to joke that the Jewish guy on the cross and me were the only two Jewish people in the church. I go, but the truth of the matter is God is about love. And that's where I always go back to. Is it about love or is it about ego or human beliefs? And if it goes to human beliefs, that is not God. God is only about love, right? No matter how you believe, God is love. And so yeah, so with the challenges and autism is a huge challenge. Being on the spectrum, I'm aware of that. I have nephews and a niece who's on the spectrum. So is that among the reasons that you were always bullied?
Being overweight for a lot of my life, that was
Mm.
another reason. I lost 100 pounds and I never once set foot in the gym, Dave. I believe if somebody wants to do something, the only person holding them back is themselves.
How did you get that mindset? That's a wonderful mindset.
Writing my book, Bullied Behind Bars, a gay Christian Trump supporter goes to prison, that title will suck the energy out of a room.
Sure.
It is who I am. I am no longer going to wear masks, pretend to appease the world when I'm miserable inside. I encourage everybody, if you're wearing masks, take them off. They're not serving you.
How did you take off some of your masks? I love talking about that.
Removing anger, resentment, hatred towards people, forgiving myself, loving myself, forgiving others, not worrying about what other people think of me. That's none of my business.
Correct.
The only person I care about who thinks of me is God. And am I serving God every single day? Am I doing God's will? Or am I doing my own will? Because it can't be both. If I'm doing my own will, Dave, that means ego comes in, and ego means edging God out.
Hmm. I love that. Yeah. No, 100%. One of my nicknames, and we had an episode about it, Kid Ego. That was a nickname when I was growing up. I was Kid Ego. I was, a little louder than I should have been, and all those things. And I don't know how much you know about me. After a suicide attempt, I said, when you have to sit down and tell your children about a suicide attempt, there is no ego there. When you're telling teenage girls about your suicide attempt as being their father, there there can't be a lot of ego behind that, because if there is, that's not, and that's why, service is so important, and taking the ego out. I still combat it. So how do you combat making sure that it's for your right purpose versus an ego? We also live a human experience.
By looking at how I treat others. The true character of the man is how he treats somebody who can't do anything for him.
Right.
How am I towards a homeless person versus a celebrity? And I'm the same. Who you see today is no different than if you see me out on the streets working. I'm no different. I am who I am. You either like me or you don't, and I don't really care.
No, I think that's awesome. And so I know that you also do. You have like a prison ministry. I don't know if it's ministry, but I know you've worked with people in prison. Isn't that correct?
It isn't correct.
Oh,
I have a strong desire to help men who are in a prison in their mind. Because, well, I was in a physical prison. The institution didn't have my mind. I was like a Paul. I was jumping up and down, cheering. These institutions were built to bring people down, to make them feel downtrodden, feel terrible about themselves, commit suicide. That's why suicide rate among men is very, very high in this country. If you are in a relationship that is abusive, abuse doesn't just happen to a woman. That is a fallacy. I know so many men. I just got out of a toxic work relationship with a emotionally abusive female 67, 70-year-old person.
yeah.
If
A lot.
you are a man and you are in an abusive relationship with a partner, a man or a woman, get out of it. It's not going to change.
Well, it can, but two people have to be willing to do that, and they have to recognize what they do. That's the biggest challenge with in relationships, about each person recognizing their own, you know, faults as well as their strengths, and how that works together. When I talk about that with people I work with, I talk about, that retooling, or recalibration of, you know, mindsets as well as that. So obviously you were bullied when you were younger, for a lot of reasons. How did you start building those tools? How did you build those resources? It just doesn't come to us one day. Oh, I need resources. Sometimes it comes from what I'll call the ashes in our life, something that had happened to us to break us at that moment, and then where we have to rise from.
In August 2015, I was driving on 495, 72 miles an hour, which is very slow. I've been known to go 130. When a Lexus SUV came the opposite direction, came down an embankment, crossed in front of my car, but by the grace of God, I was saved. I was protected. That's the moment, that aha moment, that I believe God was drawing a line in the sand, saying, you're either going to do my will or you're going to do your own will. You're going to cheat, steal, lie, be dishonest, use people for your advantage, manipulate people, wear the face mask. And I didn't want that for my life. And ever since then, I turned my life over to God. I have a very strong discipline, which I started when I was in solitary confinement, of praying, fasting, reading my Bible, exercising, making my bed. All of those disciplines have helped me to become the man I am today.
Yep. Well, so those are the things that bring us in. So you mentioned that you were in prison. Would you share? You don't have to share the specific details. What was the mindset that you had, that got you there? You know,
The I've been to prison twice. The mindset the first time, I worked at a car dealership, Freedom Nissan on Shelburne Road. They didn't pay me my commissions. I impulsively chose to try to sell one of their cars. The mindset there was I'm no longer going to be bullied. I'm no longer going to have people taking advantage of me anymore. I did it the wrong way. The anger, the resentment had clouded my sound judgment.
Sure, anger does that. Because it's triggers, and you had mentioned about the triggers of being angered or being taken advantage of, which probably brought back a lot of that bullying experience.
When I talked about working for edible arrangements and being taken advantage of by the owner, those were triggering for me because I was once again being manipulated by an owner and being emotionally abused every single day. And guess what? When I said to her, stop blaming other people for your problems, you know what she did? She threatened a restraining order against me. That is the mind of a sociopath, psychopath that I removed myself from. Because guess what? If she's going to threaten a restraining order, she's going to lie and cheat and steal every single step of the way. And she did. She lied and told people that I tried to steal cookie dough. It's just absurd. The whole facility is covered in cameras. If she actually had evidence, she would have called the police or presented it to me. It was just a ruse.
Well, that's a lot of times, and I've had that happen to me as well, is, when you're a loud person or have any sort of background with anger, people use that very quickly against you, and then have it's sort of a double-edged sword to try to cut you, but it also, at times, at least in my, is a battle of passions. So, how have you learned how to manage some of those anger challenges?
By not taking it personally, not trying to seek revenge. Look, if I really wanted to, I was driving the company car. I could have gone to the most expensive gas stations and fueled her car. But I didn't allow her anger to steal my joy. And when I felt like there's nothing more I can do here, it's a lost cause, I had to separate because here's the thing. I didn't want the my old self to come back. And whether you think your old self is dead in the water, it can come back
Sure.
if you don't recognize triggers. And triggers for me are when people are not taking accountability for their actions, they're blaming others. And this was this woman's whole philosophy. Everything I listened to her, I had to endure listening to her for weeks on end. And it was always the same somebody else's fault. Whether it was the greatest I can give you is she told me that Midas convinced her to spend $3,000 on car repairs. I wanted to ask her, what size gun did they put to your head to convince you to do that? See, it's all victimhood. Everything about her was playing the victim.
Yeah, well, that's
Folks, if you are playing the victim, you are only hurting yourself. You are allowing other people to steal your joy. You need to recognize what your stake, what you're doing wrong in any situation.
right, and that's the thing. A lot of people aren't. One of the things I've mentioned before on the show, as well as other interviews, is the monsters in our head are much scarier than the monsters underneath the bed that we imagine. And it really is when you are able to look at that yourself in so many different ways to find what you did wrong even in a good situation. There's things. It's always about that self introspection is really so helpful. I mean, even when a relationship's going well, you always want to check in and have that check in moment, and to make your relationship that much stronger. And when you've already come in through with his ideas of triggers and past behaviors, you need to heal through that. You owe yourself. So when you were talking before about all of that, you had to start with yourself. What was the one thing when you were in that prison, both in your mind and physically, that you started doing for yourself? You mentioned about prayer and things like that. So could you
Bible
walk?
study, All that time, I went to every single Bible study from Jehovah's Witness, Scientology, Christian Science, Catholicism. If you want to be a true disciple for God, you have to understand what the other cults or organized religions are teaching.
Sure.
Otherwise, what benefit are you offering? How can I, if you don't know what Jehovah's Witnesses are teaching their
They're
cult
followers.
members,
Yeah.
how would you be able to help them? You can't. I also have a book called Religion, Cults, and Other Religions, I believe is what it's called. It's a Rose Bible. And I bring that along with me. Again, you have to be educated. In order to be a good disciple for God, you have to have the full armor of God. You have to know what's in that Bible. You have to be doing the activities. You have to be educated. Nobody wants to have a conversation that the other person has no idea what they're talking about.
Well, yeah, and that's where it's always helpful to come out with facts, not I feel. The I feel statements are very powerful when you're talking to somebody, but when you're talking about something that's going on, and religion, everybody, especially now, religion is hyper sensitive conversations around it because you can't say this, you can't say that, and I always go, let's go back to the facts. I was just recently in a men's retreat, and uh, there were a lot of people, followers, right? They all are saying they're followers, but they all had different ways to get to through Jesus, right? It was all Christian followers, so and I, as a somebody of a Jewish faith, but who has some knowledge, I found it so interesting to that they're really getting angry at each other. And I'm like, guys, and we started here earlier, God is love. So if he's doing that, then that's an ego. Are you so sure? And where I've always go back to the point on Jesus and anything, I've been taught in the Jewish faith that I talk directly to God. I don't have an intermediary like Jesus, and I don't discount it either. I have a friend who's a priest, and our joke is that I won't discount it. I believe Jesus lived, was a historical figure at the minimum. Was he the son of God? I'm not sure, but I don't want to die and God goes, you ignored my son. I'm open to hearing the preachings. It's all about love. And so when you are focused in your most authentic self, being fully involved in love, what does that look like for you?
Accepting people for who they are, not trying to change other people, looking at how I can help them, how I can serve them. It's funny. A couple of years ago, I was on a job interview, and the guy I was interviewing with said, "Boy, you don't talk a lot. You listen." I said, "That's the job of a salesperson. That's the true job of a disciple of God is to listen to what somebody says. Nobody is going to take you seriously if you stand on the corner and have a sign that says, 'Everybody, you're going to hell.' It doesn't work, folks. It's never worked. Trying to turn somebody else to your agenda is not going to work. It's not.
Well,
Telling somebody they're in sin, we're all in sin. Let's just face it, Dave. Nobody is good except God the Father.
yeah, right. We all sin. I mean, that's one of the things, and we just keep striving to be better than who we were when we've made a mistake. We continue to go forward, and that's the real idea of life. How with taking religion out, it's like, okay, if you made a mistake today, don't make it again, because then it's a choice, and sometimes choices are poor, and we make choices because we also are living a human experience. When we talk about religion, it's faith based. It's a belief that these things happened. It's a belief that there's a next level, that we go to heaven, or whatever that next level is for you. And sounds like you've done a lot of personal development and growth in that. And today, when you're going out there to help people, are you only helping people with your new book?
I'm helping people with the Bible, basic instructions before leaving Earth. Understand, David, I'm sorry, Stephen Covey wrote a book many, many years ago called Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
Sure.
Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Hmm.
Nobody wants you parroting a whole bunch of Bible verses to them. Anybody. In fact, some of the worst cult leaders, Jim Jones, David Koresh, Warren Jeffs, all of those men could parrot Bible scripture like there's no tomorrow, but they didn't live the Bible. Your actions, my actions, should reflect that I'm a disciple for God, not how much Bible scripture I can memorize.
Yeah, yeah. It's not about memorization. That's why, it's all about concepts. It's all about living the life. And so, how are you living now that is aligned, not only by reading your Bible, and you wrote a book. So let's, that book, I guess, has some religion in it, or discussion around that.
I wouldn't say it has religion in it. It talks about how I had my near death experience and that really altered my life. Look, I believe I had what I would call a Robert Frost moment. The two roads in the sand, and I chose the road less traveled.
Yep. And so, what did you do with that road less traveled?
I have made it my mission to help people come to God. And listen, folks, it doesn't have to be God, but I will tell you, it has to be a higher power. That's the biggest problem with the self-help community is they give this false hope that the human being can fix all of their problems. No way. I don't care whether it's the ocean, whether it's the grass, what I hope it's God, but that's up to the individual. It has to be something outside of you. Otherwise, ego will drive you to everything that you do.
Well, I'm going to push you back a little bit on it in that because you have to do, it has to be you. You get to make those choices. God doesn't make those choices because when you were in trouble, or doing those things, that was still a Matt
No
decision.
question. I am in control of where I got to
Right.
where I am. No question.
But
And so
still,
if I'm blaming outside forces, I'm not holding myself in integrity.
right. And that's where I'm going with
What
that.
I mean is I have to relinquish control because control is an illusion.
Yeah.
We aren't in control at all. God is in control.
Yeah. What we could do is control ourselves, our behaviors, our reactions. So, yeah. So how are you, doing that for yourself? So obviously you had some issues earlier, and now what type of exercises or mindset did you you know do? What are your resources? Because that's really what I love
The
talking about.
Bible, journaling, praying, exercising, fasting, engaging in activities like swimming. I'm a huge ocean swimmer.
Hmm.
I believe that going way out in the ocean is there's no better experience in the world than that. None.
Yeah, no, I've done that as well at times, and it is that peacefulness. You're out there by yourself, and it's just very relaxing. You're very one with God at that point. Also, I know I do a lot of nature walks and things like that, where when there's nobody around, you feel a presence of something larger than you.
Yes. I encourage people to engage in activities that they can move their body.
Mhm.
Swimming, canoeing, dancing, gardening, cooking, all of these activities, you're moving your body. Get away from activities where you isolate. You're all alone. That is why the suicide rate is so high. It's because of isolation. You get into depression, you get anxious. If you look in the Bible, every time somebody sinned, it was when they were idle. David sinned because he wasn't out in the garden where he should have been. He was with Bathsheba. Eve should have been with Adam. Almost all the time when we sin, it's because we're idle. Idle hands are a devil's playground, folks.
Sure, it's the choices we make in those moments. It's not just being idle. Idle, I could sit by myself and be very wonderful. I write books, so I write, a lot of books. I go into those worlds, and those worlds are, in my view, really healthy environments for growth, and that's why we always plant seeds and things like that. Uh, but it's what we do with it. It's when we live too much in that ego, right? Adam and Eve. Eve, you know, could have said, no, no. God said, don't eat the apple and life will be wonderful. But the real story is she was tempted by the snake and the apple and was like, all right, let me go try, right? That was an ego part of that story. So yeah, the uh so what and so today that's not what you do. You've wrote a book. What made you write that book? That's a very long title. It's almost like reading a book with that title.
It was cathartic for me to get my life out there, to expose the dangers of what will happen if you allow anger, resentment, hatred to take over your life.
Right.
I didn't want to have anybody go through what I went through. And I wanted to expose the fact that corruption just doesn't occur in the major cities. It's going on right here in Shelburne, Vermont, still today.
How so?
I am still targeted by local police departments because I expose the corruption.
Okay. Well, I think society has not been clear about a lot of things. I mean, even the title of your book, being a Christian and a Trump supporter, but being a gay man, uh, those are usually uh, aligned all differently, right? Everybody runs to be to the religion part of it, but it doesn't always align with everything that they want. How do you find alignment in your life?
By doing God's will every single day, by striving to be a better person, by reflecting on my day every single day, by reaching out and surrounding myself with positive people and removing toxic, negative people out of my life.
Mm, okay.
And always being curious, always, always asking questions. I can always tell if somebody is disinterested as soon as they stop asking questions.
Yeah, yeah. Once they disengage in a conversation, that's the really hard part. And you could see energy. Do you while you're praying using the Bible, are you also doing any energy work for yourself? Well, I guess you are, as you mentioned about swimming, dancing. You're always moving, so that way nothing stays the same, and moving through life in general. So when you get today, can you explain to us a little bit about when you get stressed? Stress will always do it, and reading a Bible will not always be the answer. It might put you at a state of calmness, but how do you receive the pressures? I mean, you were just saying that the police are, harassing you at times and looking at, checking on you. In a way. How do you then manage those stresses?
Journaling, jumping in the ocean, going for a walk, talking to a friend,
Mm, yeah, it's always important to do stuff like that.
finding a good tribe of men and women in your life that can build you up. If you don't have an accountability, folks, you need to find an accountability partner. And this is not your best friend. This is a man or a woman that will hold you accountable for your actions. I have a process that I run if anybody's out of integrity. or out of accountability. It's a great process. It looks at why the decision making ended up to where it is. And it's always several bad decisions that led. It's not just one, it's multiple bad decisions that led to a person, for example, being late. My opinion, when you show up late, you're saying to the other person that your time is more valuable than theirs.
If it becomes excessive. One time late, things happen at times, but I'm also an early person. I'm generally places, 10, 15 minutes early. My kids sometimes get upset, but I'm comfortable in always, if not over calculating, on the side of being there early or on time.
The only day I was late was the day I was born. I am early for everything that I do.
So do you
And
have, do you
being
have,
a man or a woman of your word,
yeah, sure.
a handshake, whether you lose or win, that is your bond. Don't ever break that because once you have no integrity, nobody wants to do business with you, folks.
100%. Integrity's the number one thing that we always have to, because integrity, for me, is the things that you do when nobody's around. You know, for me, one of the stories is one of my best friends had passed away unexpectedly, and I always told him I would take care of his mom. And so there was nobody watching. The rest of there was no real family there. There was some family out of town. I could have walked away from it completely, and for the next 6 months of that woman's life, I took care of her. There was a nurse who physically took care of her, but I took care of all the other needs. I was the responsible adult in charge, and it's one of those things. I could have, I talk about it not to pat me on the back, but nobody would have known, right? It's on those dark roads when you're there. If you still speed, do you do anything that it's integrity? It's not just what happens when everybody's watching. It's when nobody's watching. Who are you and what do you do?
Absolutely. God is always watching.
Yeah. No, I'm a firm believer of God is always watching. All right. I know we've taken a lot of your time, and what I usually do is I have people think about one thing that you'd like to plant a seed. I go, let's walk into the magic garden. I'd like you to plant a seed, and what the seed is something you'd like to grow for the audience, so that they can think about, that they can nurture within themselves to grow and make our life garden that much prettier.
What is something in you that triggers you about somebody else?
Well, what triggers me is I want to help people. I know what it feels like to be in a darkness. Like I said, I attempted suicide, so I know that what that feels like. And for me, what that feels like is I don't want anybody to ever. In fact, while I was in the act of suicide, I was told it's not my time and I'm supposed to go back and tell the story. And I've published a bunch of books, not about suicide attempts, but many stories, and started this podcast because I want to hear everybody's story. I believe everybody should be able to share their story, live their story. So that's what I want to do, is make sure everybody's story is fully aligned with who they are so they can be their most authentic self.
Live in integrity, folks. Be a man or a woman of your word, whether it hurts or helps you.
That's awesome. Well, Matt, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And for everybody else, as always, want you to, have some peace and love in your life. And when you bring a bat, remember, it's just to hit your sweet spot. And I wish you all the best. God bless.